welcome to my channel. Welcome to today's video. Today's video is going to be another installment of my Would I Repurchase series. So that's a series that I do once a month here on my channel where I randomly pick 10 palettes from my collection and just talk about if I would repurchase them if they were going to disappear from my collection tomorrow. So if that sounds good to you, if you like talking about eyeshadow palettes, make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't yet. I would love it if you stick around. But with all that, let's just get started talking about some eyeshadow. All right, so like I mentioned in the intro, the way that I like to do this video, because I know that there are quite a few people who do this type of video, is I like to come at it with the mindset of these palettes are already in my collection. I've already tried them. I know the formula. I know how they work. And for some reason or another, they disappeared overnight in my collection. And let's just say for argument's sake that they're still available to purchase. Would I repurchase them? So that's how I come at it in this video. I do like to just use my Tiny Decisions app and randomly generate 10 eyeshadow palettes because I think that's a little bit more fun. So that's what we're gonna do. I am just gonna choose 10 eyeshadow palettes here. I already have the ones that we've already used, already talked about, so I'll list the playlist up above and down below if you want to see other videos in this series. I have those blacked out, so we won't roll them again, at least most of them. For the most part, I have them all blacked out. So let's just start and pick the palettes we're going to talk about today. We have the Dior Miss Dior Quint. Next up is Colourpop of Quartz. The third palette here, Charlotte Tilbury Star Aura. A lot of small ones. Natasha Denona Retro palette. Let's pick number 5. Huda Beauty Khaki Haze. Colourpop Feelin' Coconutty. I need 4 more palettes. McGrath Nude Allure. Odens Eye Hey Reindeer. Ugh. What's Up Beauty Geodes. And then the last one is Tarte Tartelette in Bloom. All right, so I'm gonna go pull all 10 of those palettes. That was 10, right? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Yes, I'm gonna pull all 10 of those palettes and we're gonna talk about them. I have all 10 palettes pulled out in front of me, so we're just gonna start in the order that I pulled them. The first one that I have is the Dior. This is the 1947 Miss Dior Quint. This is what this one looks like. It has a lot of just rosy tone shades. This came out with the Mille Fiori collection, I believe. And, you know, I would repurchase this. I'm a Dior lover at heart. It's just like an iconic French brand. I find especially like their fashion to be very sophisticated. I don't know. There's something about Dior that since I was young, I've always really liked. It was one of the first makeup brands that I purchased from. There's something about it that I just never have been able to resist. And this would be one of the Quints I think I would repurchase, only because out of the ones that I have, and I really don't have that many in my opinion, I have less than 5. This is one of the ones that's more iconic to me because this is a limited edition Quint that came out and is supposed to represent Lady Dior, the one who came out the Lady Dior bag, and it's a very specific collection. So I do really like having this one, whereas one of the ones that I have, the soft cashmere, like that's just one of their staple quints. I don't know if necessarily I'd rush out to buy that, but this is one that I really like having in my collection just for collection purposes, and there's not too many products like that that really pull at my heartstrings. So this is one I would definitely keep. The next one I pulled was the Colourpop of Quartz. This is a 9-pan and it's very cool toned. I had a lot of Colourpop palettes and I decluttered 80% of them. I have less than 10 Colourpop palettes as of now in my collection. So this was one that I kept, but you can see that it's not one that I use a lot. It's definitely not my most reach for Colourpop palette. And I have to say I could probably do without this one. If this was to disappear overnight, I have other cool tones now that fit the bill for what this was in the past. An example that comes to mind is the Gloss Gods First Gal on Jupiter. I recently reviewed that palette and it's kind of giving similar vibes to that with the cool tones. Yeah, and the shimmers are more impactful in that Gloss Gods, so I wouldn't need this anymore. It's not one that I find like super necessary in my collection. I like having it. I doubt I declutter it anytime soon, but it's not one, when I think of like a cool tone palette, it's not one that I think of in the forefront of my mind to reach for. Number 3 is another just little small palette, and this is the Charlotte Tilbury Hollywood Flawless Eye Filter Luxury Palette in Star Aura. This was one of her limited edition palettes, and I've had trouble reaching for this a little bit because it was limited edition. It has 4 of the Baked Gelée formulas. She doesn't have that in all of her palettes, and this is a pretty palette. I do enjoy having this in my collection. Now, there was a time when I was really into Charlotte Tilbury. I wanted to purchase everything that she was coming out with. I wanted to have all the quads. And I'm just not at a place in my life anymore with that. I find now that I've really gone a little bit more into the world of indie, I'm just finding so much other shadows that work better for me, that I have an easier time working with. Her eyeshadow formula is just overpriced at the end of the day, and that's the reason why I wouldn't repurchase this. I do like having this in my collection. I think it's a special Charlotte Tilbury quad. Again, like I don't have a million of these. I have maybe 5. Like it takes a while because they're more expensive. Like I'm not just going out buying a ton of these at the time like I was with Colourpop. So it's one of the ones that I do remember in my collection as far as Charlotte Tilbury, but it's still, being the person that I am now, like just trying to be more mindful of my purchases, this is not one that I would go out and repurchase that I find necessary in my collection today. Moving on to the 4th one, this is just an absolutely, like out of all of these, this would be my least hesitation to repurchase, and that's the Natasha Denona Retro Palette. This is one of my most reached for Natasha Denona palettes. I would say this and the Glam. I did a video, it's been like over a year now, ranking all of my Natasha Denona palettes, and I believe this came in number 2. I think I put the Glam as number 1. But this is a really just nice mauve tone palette, a rosy palette. It's not overly rosy where I would consider it a monochromatic palette. It still has some shades that can give you different looks. And I love this. I really do reach for this quite a bit. I like that it has just some really staple shades in here, some really nice tones. I love this shade. I love all the shades. There's not one in here that I dislike. Maybe the psychedelic only because it's a little bit more textured, but I'm not mad at that. Like it's just a lot more impactful on the eye. So I think that this is one of Natasha Denona's best palettes, even considering the ones that have come out since this palette. It's still, I would still put it at number 2. So I would absolutely repurchase this one, no questions asked. Moving on down the line, number 5 is the Huda Beauty Khaki Haze. I don't have too many of these small Obsession palettes. I have this one and I have the Smoky Obsession. I bought this sometime Black Friday because Huda Beauty does amazing Black Friday sales, and I had wanted this, but I will say when I got it, I was a little disappointed. I was expecting it to be a little bit more khaki, and this is not. This is really just like a neutral palette, a warm tone neutral palette. You really have no greens. I mean, you kind of have like this gold green, that's a shimmer. This one's a little bit more gold. This one's more of like that olivey gold. There's not even a green matte in here. So to me, this is not a khaki palette. It's nice. I don't mind the color story, but I really don't reach for this palette like I should. So I probably, for that reason, would not repurchase it. I mean, just the fact that it was a palette that I didn't feel like I had to purchase right away when this collection dropped, and I waited for Black Friday, and I was like, oh, I've been wanting this palette. It's a good price. Let me pick it up. That just tells me that this is not something that I have to have in my collection. There is one more of these Obsession palettes that I've kind of had my mind on. It's the Jaguar palette, I think. It was one of those cool tone palettes that she came out with her like animal collection. If you have that palette, let me know if it's worth picking up, because I don't know, that one is still on my mind of one that like I eventually want to get. But yeah, you know, the khaki, it's not bad. Like, I don't find the formula to be really that different in her 9 pans versus her big ones. I know some people say the formula is not the same. Maybe I just don't know enough about eyeshadow to really like tell the difference, but I find this still easy to work with. I was expecting something different from this palette, and because of that, I just don't reach for it like I should. Another small palette and another Colourpop palette is the Colourpop Feeling Coconutty palette. This is one that I kept because it's just small, neutral. I figured, what the heck, like, it's not going to take up that much space in my collection. So no, I don't need to repurchase this. First of all, like the first time I purchased this, the packaging broke, or the first time I opened it, the packaging broke. So based off that alone, like, would not buy. I think that this is like a great concept that Colourpop came out with, having these little quads, but I decluttered most of them. I kept this one only because of the broken packaging and because it was neutral. There's not someone I'd really want to give this to, and I'm not just gonna like toss it in the trash. And then the other one I kept was the Capricorn quad that they came out with for the Zodiac collection, because I'm a Capricorn. So that's why, you know, I would not repurchase this, not even a little bit. No, it's not. That's not the worst palette out of the bunch. Let's just move on. The next one that I pulled in that was chosen is this Pat McGrath Holiday Quint. This came out holiday 2022 because she came out with more quints for 2023. And this is the Nude Allure Quint. This is what this looks like. I don't know if I would really call it nude. I mean, it's nude for Pat McGrath, that's for sure. I do really enjoy these quints. I think that this is a great formula. Again, though, like, these are kind of more specialty shades. They're not specialty shades, but they're mostly all shimmer shades. And so because of that, it doesn't give me one cohesive look without having to dip into another palette. So I tend to just reach for those palettes a little bit less. And I am being like harsh on these. Like, granted, like I said, I'm trying to get into the mindset of having less. So I am being very, very hard on these palettes on if I would repurchase them or not. But already having this in my collection and knowing how little I would reach for it, I don't think I would repurchase this. I think this is a great formula. Like I said, nothing wrong with this. If this is a color story that speaks to you, if this is a color story you know you'd reach for all the time, then by all means get it. But this is not the Pat McGrath Quint, I think, because I have all 4 from last holiday. So I have all 6 of the quints that she came out with for holiday. This would not be the one that I would repurchase. It would probably be one of the color stories from last year. If I had to guess, maybe Sunset Romance would be the one. So yeah, this is just a little too pinky, a little too already have these shades and other palettes from Pat McGrath. So it's just not special enough for me to specifically reach for this palette and want to use it. Now next, number 8, we're coming on the worst palette of the bunch, and that is the Odens Eye Hey Reindeer palette. I recently talked about this palette in my speed reviews. I put that video up in February. So if you saw that video, then you already know, like, I ranked this dead last. Out of all the Odens Eye holiday palettes, I liked this one the least. I said I would maybe declutter this palette. The color story to me just doesn't make sense. I have a really hard time finding looks with this palette. Individually, the shades are fine, but all together, it kind of just confuses my brain. And then on top of that, this formula was not the same formula that I've experienced from Odens Eye. I just found the mattes to be a little bit lackluster, the shimmers to be a little bit lackluster. I don't know. I really didn't enjoy this palette whatsoever. This is on my chopping block to maybe even declutter this palette. I said that in that video. It's just newer, so I'm kind of just mulling it over if I want to be like the completionist, or if I should just find a better home for this palette. I might just maybe give it a few more tries, try and do like maybe 5 looks or something and really decide. But at the end of the day, like, I just have too many eyeshadow palettes probably to be messing around with that. So yeah, I definitely, like, without a question, would not repurchase, and I would not recommend purchasing this palette. Now, number 9 goes to the What's Up Beauty Geodes palette. 100% yes, would repurchase. While I have all the What's Up Beauty palettes, this I would put number 3. Like, it's my least favorite What's Up Beauty palettes. However, this formula is so good, and I still like the color story enough to repurchase it. I love this palette. What's Up Beauty is just like this emerging brand, and I think they're gonna come out with so much that I'm going to want to purchase. Everything, all 3 of their palettes, like, I love all the color stories. They're my kind of colors. They're easy to work with. The mattes are buildable. The shimmers are impactful. And they're not, you know, necessarily always like that super shifty multi-chrome shimmer. They're good, impactful shimmers. Better than mainstream, but not just like a ton of just like a kitchen sink shimmer where just like everything's in it. They're intentional shimmers, and I like that. So I would 100% repurchase it, even though it's not my, you know, putting all the What's Up Beauty palettes up against each other. This would not be my favorite. However, like, I can't with What's Up Beauty. Like, they are slowly but surely climbing their way up to one of my favorite just brands overall. And the very last palette I have to talk about is an old palette, one of the oldest palettes in my collection, but I can't get rid of it. It is the Tartelette in Bloom. One of the first palettes that I purchased. This palette is old. It still smells fine. I've used it. It doesn't look used, but I'm very light-handed with my makeup products, so that's to be expected. I love this palette. I absolutely would repurchase this. I even thought that this year I would maybe try doing a pan that eyeshadow palette and try to just focus on one eyeshadow palette throughout the whole year and attempt to finish this. And this was going to be the palette that I was going to choose for that challenge. I ultimately decided not to because I am so light-handed with makeup. I didn't want to just disappoint myself. So I don't know what it is about this palette. Like, it has good memories tied to it. This was really one of the palettes that I purchased, you know, when I was first getting into makeup. I never purchased the Too Faced chocolate bar palette, the Naked or the original Naked palette. I never purchased either of those. This is that palette to me. This holds that spot, so it's hard for me to just let go of this palette. I might even, you know, declutter this one, and I would repurchase a brand new one to always have it in my collection. Not only does it just hold special memories to me, but the shadows are just good. They're great eyeshadows. It got me into Tarte for a while. Like, in my early 20s, I was purchasing so much from Tarte before they kind of, it seems like they went in more of a younger direction, and that's kind of when we broke up. But for a while there, like, I was really into Tarte. I owned a lot of palettes from them, and over the years I've decluttered quite a few of them, but this one continues to stick around. And that's all 10 eyeshadow palettes that I have to talk about today. I would love to hear your thoughts down below. Do you own any of these palettes? Do we have the same opinions, different opinions? Are any of these palettes on your wish list and you maybe reconsidered them? I would love to know all your thoughts down below in the comments. But this is where I'm going to leave you all. I hope you're having a great one, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, everyone.